Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So it is obviously Tuesday, which means it's time for a tier list Tuesday. And I decided this week we are going to be tier listing every single team's number one defenseman and how I'm going at defining number one defenseman. I'm making it pretty straightforward so we don't have any complaints. It is just whoever is the time of ice leader on their respective team, whoever's playing the most. So, for example, the Carolina Hurricanes is actually Brett Burns, not Slavin. So even though I think Slavin's better, it is going to be Brett Burns on this tier list. It's whoever's leading their team in time of ice, just so it's not subjective and some people complain in the comments, oh, this guy's our number one defenseman. I'm going based on time of ice. I feel like that is a pretty fair thing. So without further ado, let's dive into it. We got superstar, elite, very good, good, and just okay. And first up, Brock Faber. I'm going to go good. Having a fantastic rookie year. Probably, in my opinion, probably should win the Calder when it's all said and done. If Bedard is going to be out for another 4 to 6 weeks, had a setback. Brock Faber, fantastic defensive results. He's putting up a decent amount of points, especially of late. Probably going to finish around 45 to 50, as well as being very good defensively. Can't put him yet in like a very good or elite, but I think good is pretty fair. Miro Heiskanen, I'm going to put him in elite. You're going to see it's a high criteria in order to be a superstar, in my opinion. But Miro Heiskanen is my number 4 defenseman in the entire NHL. This year, not having as much offensive success, but his defensive numbers are even better than last year when they were very good last year. He's like top 5 in expected goals against per 60. He is definitely elite, teetering on superstar. Brett Burns, very good. Last year, I think he had around 62, 63 points. The points aren't as good right now, but the underlying numbers are even better in terms of especially defensively. Him and Slavin form one of the best pairs in the entire NHL. I think Brett Burns is still a very good top 25, maybe even top 20 defenseman in the entire NHL. Thomas Shabbat, I'm going to go good. Hasn't played a ton of games this year, but still one of the better offensive defensemen in the entire league. Not as bad defensively as he was in prior years. This guy used to be one of the worst defensive defensemen in the entire league early on in his career. He's definitely shored that up. Him and Chikrin are a very good pair, but I can't really say very good or elite right now. Rasmus Dahlin, elite, 74 points last year, yet again on pace for north of 65. I think at this point, you gotta have him in your top 10. I wouldn't quite go superstar. Hasn't really taken that superstar step. Probably not even going to be top 5 in Norris voting this year, but definitely an elite defenseman. Vince Dunn, very good. Last year broke out for 65 points, I believe. This year, we thought maybe it was a fluke. It wasn't. He has 37 and 48 games right now. So he's yet again probably going to go above the 60-point mark. Absolutely carries Seattle's defense core. They have a solid defense core, but in terms of an offensive guy, he really carries a lot of the workload. Sean Durzi's good. I think he's probably going to finish hovering around 50 points while also coming a decent way in terms of his defensive game. So I think Sean Durzi is a good number 1 defenseman at this point. Evan Bouchard, controversial guy, but right now he's going to probably put up around point per game. The underlying numbers are very good. Yes, he does play with Ekholm, but he has really emerged after 2 seasons of being around a 40-point guy at 21 and 22. Just didn't get that power play exposure that Tyson Barrie was obviously chewing up. He's really broken out. It's not just because he plays on the power play. No other Edmonton defenseman of the McDavid or Draisaitl era have been this good. I think you got to respect Evan Bouchard. Mario Ferraro, not a number 1 guy. He's maybe a top pair, more so defensive defenseman, kind of thrusted into a number 1 role on the San Jose Sharks, but not an actual number 1 defenseman. I don't think that's controversial. Cam Fowler, I'm going to go good. I think he definitely doesn't have the best underlying numbers because he plays on Anaheim, but this guy absolutely chews up minutes. If he didn't have such a fat contract, if I was a contender, I would trade for him in a heartbeat to be a top pair guy, similar to what happened with Lindholm. You look at how good he's been in Boston. I think Cam Fowler does kind of get underappreciated. Victor Hedman, it's going to be a controversial one because he is putting up above point per game right now, but he has been arguably the worst defensive defenseman in the entire NHL when you look at the underlying numbers. I think Evolving Hockey literally has him as the worst even-strength defenseman. So yes, the offense has been so good, but if you're bleeding goals nonstop, he's basically what Erik Carlson was last year, but I don't even think Erik Carlson was this bad defensively. He's basically that, but not going for 100 plus points. So I'm looking at Victor Hedman. Yes, I feel like the casuals kind of still think that he is a top 5 defenseman. I back-to-back years of having pretty shit defensive numbers. Last year, I kind of forgave him because he had such a good track record. He was in like the bottom 15% defensively last year, but he has been one of the worst defensemen in the entire NHL. So I think I got to bump him down to good. Obviously, still great offensively, so I can't have him in like okay with Mario Ferraro, but I think good is a pretty fair spot. Charlie McAvoy, still teetering on a top 5 defenseman in the entire NHL for me. I think he's definitely definitely top 6, top 7. The offense has really came a long way the past 2 to 3 years. The defense hasn't been as good as last year when the Bruins were just fantastic overall, or even in prior years. But I think Charlie McAvoy still is a fantastic defenseman. But Miro Heiskanen and another guy that I'm going to talk about later have jumped him in the past 2 years. Adam Fox is a superstar. I still have him as a top 10 player in the entire NHL. This year, people are sleeping on him. I think he has 37 points in 38 games. He just missed all of November, but he has still been fantastic. If he was fully healthy, I think Quinn Hughes and Cal Makar probably would still be ahead of him in the Norris race, but he would no doubt be number 3. This is his down year, and he's still on pace for again, point per game, fantastic defensively, and that's with Ryan Lindgren. That has really been ass playing with Ryan Lindgren. He still posted pretty solid results. Adam Fox is an absolute superstar. Noah Dobson in that elite, just barely cracked my top 50 overall. Probably you got to have him at least top 15 defenseman in the NHL, even with kind of his lack of track record. But he's still a 50-point guy back-to-back years, and now on pace for 85 points. He has been fantastic for my New York Islanders, really taking that next step. Just so much more aggressive in terms of at the blue line, a much more dangerous playmaker. Last year, he just did not have the vision that he did this year and the confidence, and as a result, he's really turned into an elite defenseman. Cal Makar, another superstar. Don't think that's much. He's being underrated because Quinn Hughes is my pick for the Norris right now, but Cal Makar in his own right is on pace for 107 points. He has been absolutely insane. He's also underrated because Nathan McKinnon's playing so goddamn good, but Cal Makar is still the best defenseman in the entire NHL. It would take Quinn Hughes or Adam Fox playing better than him next year and probably the year after in order for Cal Makar to lose that number 1 defenseman in the entire NHL distinguished mark. Drew Doughty, this guy, similar to a Cam Fowler, but he puts up better underlying results. Drew Doughty, yet again, probably going to lead the NHL in terms of time on ice. I think he's averaging 26.05. Yes, he is not as prolific offensively or even defensively compared to 5-6 years ago, but he is still a top 20, top 15 defenseman in the entire NHL, in my opinion, and he does it against such hard competition for so many goddamn minutes every single night. He's been playing 26 minutes for 12 years at this point. It is absolutely insane, the workload that this guy can handle, and as a result, definitely a very good defenseman. John Carlson, he's still a very good offensive defenseman. The problem, now I'm bumping him up. If the problem is Washington has just been brutal this year in terms of their overall forwards and offense, I think they're third in the entire NHL at 2.4 goals per game. Only the Blackhawks and the Sharks are worse. So I think if you put John Carlson on a good offensive team, he'd be going for around 65, 70 points. The problem is Washington is clearly stalled in terms of their offense, in terms of some of their best offensive players are just having horrendous seasons. He's still on pace for around 50 points. I think that that's kind of just the situation that makes people think that he hasn't been the same because his underlying numbers are still very good. John Marino is actually the leading ice time getter for the Devils. He's okay. He's definitely a very good second pair guy, low-end top pair guy. He's not going to blow you out of the water offensively, but he is very good defensively. But when compared to these other number 1 defenseman superstars, it definitely doesn't really stand out. So as a result, I got to put him in okay. Josi's still elite. I think he might be one of the most underrated defensive superstars in terms of the NHL right now. I feel like people are just overlooking him because he's getting up there in age. The Predators aren't that good of a team. He's playing much better defensively than even in his Norris year when he was the Norris runner-up. And last year, especially better defensively, as well as also being yet again on pace for around 65, 70 points. He is still no doubt a top 10, probably top 7 defenseman in the entire NHL for me. I think he's underrated at this point. Chris Letang, good. Still very prolific offensively. He obviously had that one 5 assist or 6 assist night. That was absolutely insane. The defensive game isn't really what it used to be. The overall skating just isn't what it used to be. No longer a top 6-7 defenseman like in his prime, but still a good player. Still can shoot up 24 minutes a night on a highly competitive team. Nothing wrong with that. Mike Matheson, the underlying numbers are pretty shit with Mike Matheson. Bad. I'm going to put him in okay. Still a good offensive defenseman, considering Montreal's defense core on the whole is pretty disappointing. He's definitely by far the best player in that defense core, but I think if you had him on any other team, he'd probably be a second pair guy, not getting a ton of power play looks, maybe on second power play. So I think he does look a little bit better on Montreal, considering Montreal has really nobody else in terms of the offensive workload. They got to kind of rely on Mike Matheson to play big minutes in big offensive spots. So overall, I think he is just an okay Okay, number one. Okay, defenseman. Brandon Montour. The points have not been here. He has 11 points in 33 games right now, which is shocking after he went for 74. I said he was extremely overrated after last season. I knew he was going to fall off. I didn't expect it like this, but the underlying numbers do suggest that he is playing much better defensively this year, as well as the offense. He's kind of just been unlucky. It's not like he's a legit 26, 27 point guy. I think he's going to bounce back. I think at this point, he's still a top 40 defenseman, but definitely not a true number one. Thankfully, they do have guys like Ekblad and Forsling to kind of ease off in terms of his role. He only plays around 22 minutes a night, but Brandon Montour is still a good player. Morgan Reilly, I'm going to go in good as well. Yeah, I'm going to go in good as well. Another solid offensive defenseman on pace for around 60, 65 points. Doesn't really do anything special in terms of defensively, but a very skilled mover of the puck as well as a good skater. I like Morgan Reilly. I think he gets overhated a little bit because of the contract. But when you look at the other contracts that have been signed recently, it's a perfectly fine deal. Josh Morrissey goes into elite. Back-to-back years where he's going to go north of 65 points. Last year, 76 and 78. Last year, he was arguably like Norris top 5 level, top 3. Not having quite the same success in terms of the points, but just an overall well-rounded game this season, playing much better defensively, and as a result, the Winnipeg Jets have been very good defensively. He is definitely their number one, has to carry a lot of the load. They have solid other pieces in that defense core, but he is the true superstar, and Winnipeg has been fantastic this year, in part because Josh Morrissey has been so good. Parayko just not a number one. Very good defensively. Doesn't have the offensive capabilities to be a number one in the NHL. Only going to give you 25 to 30 points most likely. That contract has 7 years left at $6.5 million. It's not that bad right now, but it could be very bad down the road. So I think okay is just fair. Alex Pietrangelo, good. Definitely him and Theodore are both very good defense, are both good. Can both switch off kind of as that number one. Neither are like a true number one, but this guy did just win the Stanley Cup playing the most minutes on his goddamn team. So I think Alex Pietrangelo is solid. Not quite what he used to be defensively. As a result, I got to bump him down into good, but still a very good offensive defenseman. Quinn Hughes, superstar. Again, I only have these three as superstars. I think this is by far the top 3 defensemen. This should be the consensus top 3 defensemen in the entire NHL right now. Whether you got to have Cale Makar number 1. I still think Adam Fox is better than Quinn Hughes, but Quinn Hughes is better this year. Going to probably maybe get to 100 points, as well as being very solid defensively compared to previous years. He has solidified himself as a top 3 defenseman in the entire NHL. Very good. Rasmus Andersson. I like Rasmus Andersson's game a lot. Him and Mackenzie Weegar have formed one of the best pairs in the entire NHL. I might be a little bit higher on him than most. I wouldn't hate you if you had... Actually, no. I think Rasmus Andersson deserves to be in very good. I think he's a stud. Travis Sanheim, he's okay. Definitely having a bounce-back year after last year securing his extension and then kind of floundering a little bit. He's definitely bounced back. As a result, Philadelphia has been a very solid defensive team. Is he an actual top 30, top 40 defenseman in the entire NHL? No, probably not, but he's solid. He's okay as a number one. You definitely want to bring in someone else. Hopefully Jamie Drysdale or someone they draft this year can eventually develop into that number one. But you can't, a legit playoff team has a guy better than Travis Sanheim as their number one. Moritz Seider, I've been called the Moritz Seider hater, but I do think he is very good. You look at his numbers, he just plays the hardest competition in the entire NHL. It is absolutely insane. They throw him every single time in his own defensive zone against the other team's first and second goddamn lines. He just gets pounded out there in terms of the competition that he goes up against. If he was in a less tough role, I think he'd be going for 55, 60 points while having far better defensive numbers. So Moritz Seider, the underlying numbers and the overall point totals, I don't think fully tell the story with a guy like Moritz Seider. Seth Jones, okay. I think he does get overhated just because of that contract. In terms of like relative play to contract, he's the worst one on this list, obviously, making $9.25 million. If he was making 5.5, I don't think anybody's complaining about Seth Jones' play. There's a difference between bad and just massively overpaid, if that makes sense. Seth Jones still probably a okay top pairing, good second pairing guy, just gets paid like top 10, top 5 defenseman in the entire NHL. So he gets absolutely shat on. And then Zach Werenski. I think Zach Werenski is very underrated. Columbus is pretty shit, yet despite that, he's on pace for around 65 points. Very, very good offensively. Not the best defensively, but also he's on Columbus, so he kind of gets a bad shake of that. But Zach Werenski, I think on a better team, would be a 65, 70, maybe even 75-point defenseman, as well as having far better defensive numbers. But this is it overall. Again, this is Durzi, this is Fowler, this is Letang. Here it is. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of it? And I'll be seeing the next one.